seconds to go. The Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup.
Yep, Sean McDonough said it best. The Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup. First time in franchise history. Greg Wyshynski, Arda, Öcal, thank you for watching The Drop on the NHL and the ESPN YouTube or listening to us wherever you get your audio podcasts. So, the incredible theater, the drama that got us to Game 7, the possibility of the second reverse sweep in Stanley Cup final history stops short, Greg Wyshynski, by 1 goal. Sam Reinhart, the difference. That's all that was required in Game 7. It was a fun game to watch. It was exciting, particularly in the third period. But before we get to all the celebrations and the fun moments on the ice, you were there on the ice for the entire celebration. Let's talk about the game itself. What did you see from these two teams in Game 7 that led to the Panthers getting the job done?
Well, Paul Maurice kind of said it best before Game 7. You know, we asked him about the pressure that was building for these teams over the course of the series. I asked him to tell me on the Paul Maurice pressure-o-meter where it was set, because he said it was evening out before Game 6. And he said, what you're going to see is the fastest, most intense hockey you can imagine in the beginning of this game, because it's just going to be the release of all of that tension. The Panthers being worried about losing the series, the Oilers rallying to get back in the series. And I think that first period was indicative of it. I mean, it was so fast and so energetic, and the pace was incredible and the drama was incredible. If you were like a casual viewer of the Stanley Cup final and you dipped into the first period of Game 7, you are definitely staying around until the end of the game. But like you said, the margin was so small. I thought the biggest key to the game, Arda, was Connor Verhaeghe scoring first. I got to be honest with you. I said it before the game, that first goal probably wins. It ended up being the team that scored first that won, but I just felt that if the Oilers came out and scored first, it would have been a here we go again feeling for the Panthers. It would have been, uh-oh, here we go. How are we getting out of this pickle now? The boulder is still rolling downhill. I think the fact that Verhaeghe scored really kind of relieved the tension a little bit for this Panthers team. Even though the Oilers tied it, I think that was a real key to the game.
Yeah, I did like the response from the Oilers so quickly, though. The Janmark breakaway, he scores high blocker on Bobrovsky. Then, of course, Sam Reinhart scores in the second period. That ends up being your game-winning goal. That's the fourth player in NHL history, by the way, to score 50-plus goals in the regular season, then a cup-clinching goal in the Stanley Cup final in the same season. The third period, though, got to give Sergei Bobrovsky credit here, because he made some key saves. The Oilers were pouring on the pressure, man, and they just could not find the back of the net when it mattered the most.
Yeah, and I think as we talk about, you know, the story of the Panthers and the full circle moments, not only for this team, but for this franchise, the fact that they closed out this game in the third period might be the most perfectly symbolic thing for this playoff run. If there was a bread and butter for this Florida team, it was their efficiency in the third period. The way they ran through the East was dominating teams in the third period. 10-0 this postseason when leading after two periods. 19-0 over the last two playoffs. 69-0-4 in their last 73 games in leading after two periods. This is what this team does best. So the idea that it all came down to them holding the fort against McDavid and Draisaitl and the Oilers rather in the third period is kind of a perfect way for them to clinch the cup. I will take you back to that Reinhart goal for a second, though. You talk about like Bobrovsky. The Bobrovsky had a lot of chaos. He was a very chaotic night for Bobrovsky. Yeah, he made good saves. I thought the Panthers did what they did in the first two games, which is give him a good look at a lot of shots. But there was a lot of haphazard pucks bouncing off him, scrambles in front, and someone texted me in the league and said he's been more lucky than good. But that's fine because he got the job done. But in that Reinhart goal, the secondary assist went to Dmitry Kulikov, and he picked up the secondary assist by sweeping a puck away from Bobrovsky's crease that had gone over his arm, a shot from Warren Fogle. And Kulikov's fallen down, pushes the thing aside, and then they come back the other way and Reinhart scores. Connor McDavid said it after the game. That could have easily been 2-1 Oilers. Instead, it's 2-1 Panthers. It's a game of inches, a game of bounces, and Kulikov created one for his team before that Reinhart goal.
Speaking of poetic, it felt like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl played the entire third period.
Yeah, right.
Especially the last 10 minutes of the game. But then the last minute of the period shows up and they look, all five skaters looked absolutely gassed, Wish. And I wonder how they will look back on those final couple minutes, even taking a timeout, trying to regroup, trying to re-energize. They just looked so sluggish at the end of the game.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to ask the Oilers this. Obviously, they were pretty brief in their comments after the game. You mentioned me being on the ice. I did get on the ice, but I spent the majority of the post game waiting for McDavid and waiting for Draisaitl to talk to these guys, especially Connor for having won the Conn Smythe, which we'll get to in a second. But you know, I wonder if ultimately digging out of the hole they dug for themselves required so much emotion, so much energy, that when you get to game 7 and you get to the third period of game 7, there's only so much you have left to give. I think if you're the Oilers, though, it's less about not being able to convert in the third period as it is not being able to convert on the power play. They got a couple in this game. There was one where they whipped the puck around. There was one where Draisaitl got his signature Ovi spot shot on the side of the net, and it was blocked. They had some opportunities. You kind of feel like if they had converted one of those, maybe it's a different game. But the Panthers, to their credit, stopped the best power play on the planet in the most important game of the season and clinched the win.
Okay, I want before I ask you all about what you did after the clock struck 0, let's talk about Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe. He did not skate back out to accept the award. I thought he was well deserving of the award. There's a lot of chatter online, fair chatter, that a lot of people wished that this award would have gone to a Sergei Bobrovsky or a member of the winning team. To me, it was Connor McDavid all along. But how do you view Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe?
It's just idiotic to not give it to somebody who was the most valuable player in the entirety of the playoffs. And that was McDavid. Like, it is not about the most valuable player on the winning team. That's not the criteria of the award. The people who had a problem with him winning, many of them said their biggest problem was that the Oilers hadn't pushed far enough in the series to warrant somebody from a losing team to win MVP. Well, they made game 7 and they lost by a goal. I don't know how much closer you need him to get before you acknowledge that he is eligible to be the MVP of the playoffs. And again, 5 points away from Gretzky's all-time scoring record for an individual postseason. He breaks Gretzky's assist record. He becomes the first player in NHL history to post back-to-back 4-point games in the Stanley Cup final, rallying his team from a 3-0 hole and coming within 2 points of tying Gretzky's record for most points in a Stanley Cup final. The record book was being rewritten by this guy. He was 4th all-time in points in a postseason for an individual player. I don't know how you don't give it to McDavid. I know the fans here in Florida booed the decision, probably because they wanted a Panther to win the award, most likely Bobrovsky, but it was Connor's award. I wish he had come out to accept it. I know why he didn't. He's completely devastated at that point. I asked him about the Conn Smythe after the game, and his answer, if I'm remembering the quote correctly, Arda, was, "Yeah, some big names on that. Yeah." I think was his direct quote about winning the Conn Smythe.
Wow.
So you could tell, like, again, I don't even know how to put myself in Connor's shoes on this, because like you have been given an award that has been won by some of the greats in this game. You have been given an award that symbolizes your importance to your team, and the fact that your team is even in a game 7 is because of you. And at the same time, you've just gotten your damn heart ripped out because you came this close to achieving your dream and your goal, your cup or bust goal. I don't even know how to process that if I'm McDavid. I'm not even sure if he'll ever be able to process what it's like to be the next Reggie Leach, the other skater, to win the Conn Smythe in a losing effort back in '76 for the Flyers.
I will say this just real quick on McDavid before we get to the cup celebrations and what you did after the clock struck 0. Like I said, I know that a lot of this McDavid being talked about among the greatest of all time, a lot of it for many people hinged on the fact that he needed to win the Stanley Cup. But I think this is a terrific bridge. He's now won the Conn Smythe trophy, which to me, in a way, if the Stanley Cup is the hardest trophy to win because it's such a team trophy and one individual can't do it, it's almost as impressive to get that close, not win the cup, but win the individual award over all of the players on the winning team. To me, that is a great notch when it's all said and done, when we talk about this in years to come, when we're debating the greatest players of all time and whether Connor McDavid should fit in that. This year actually helps his case when it's all said and done.
It's an interesting thought, in the sense that it does address not winning a cup when you can point to that award and say, but he did everything he could and his team just couldn't do it for him. And I think that's always been, he's been a bit Teflon in his career as far as the criticism. Like when the Capitals didn't win, it was always Ovechkin failed in the playoffs and, all that stuff, right? And when Connor doesn't win, it's much more about what the Oilers didn't do and didn't surround him with the right players, or Draisaitl was hurt or whatever. That being said, and I'm not trying to criticize McDavid. I love McDavid. I think what he did in this postseason is remarkable. I think if you adjust it for era, it might actually be the best playoff run we've ever seen for a player in this league. But you have to say that with the caveat that he didn't score in the last 2 games of the Stanley Cup final. Now, again, he scored 8 points in the preceding 2 games that put them in Game 7.
Right.
But he didn't have a point in Game 7, and neither did Draisaitl. It was Matthias Janmark who gets the goal for Edmonton in Game 7 against the Florida Panthers. And so they're never here without Connor. He deserves the MVP. But if you want to kind of side-eye the idea that the best player in the world doesn't have a Stanley Cup because he couldn't generate a goal in Game 7, I think we have to accept that as part of the story of his postseason.
Okay. Let's talk about the celebrations. The first thing I'd like to do here is talk about it from the I watched it on the broadcast point of view.
Please. I'm dying to know because I didn't get to see any of it. So please tell me all about it.
But then after that, I want to hear it from the you covered it. What did you do after the cup, made its way to the ice point of view? So the number one thing that I will remember from the cup celebration is when Paul Maurice finally got to hoist the Stanley Cup. That is an all-time lift. That is Ray Bourque-esque to me. Like the emotion that man went through in a span of 30 seconds was absolutely remarkable. And that will leave a mark for any hockey fan. It will be a core memory for any hockey fan for decades to come. And it happened during the interview with our colleague Emily Kaplan, which was even more spectacular. She asks a question. Paul Maurice gets patted on the shoulder and he says, "Oh, hold on a second. We have a visitor." He turns around. He receives the Stanley Cup. And without raising it immediately, he looks at it and he just stares at it in his hands. Like it's almost as if it was in his lap and he's staring down at it for a good 5 seconds. And then he finally kisses it there and then raises it. And you can see it in his face. It was almost like the famous Lanny McDonald picture where he's like nestling his head and you can just see the exhale on his face. That's what Paul Maurice had when he was raising it in the air. And then he goes through these wide range of emotions, relief, elation, happiness. And then he starts repeating, F yeah, F yeah, F yeah. Like he's just so happy and like full of like, we did it. I told you we could do this. Like, and then he finally, after all that, okay, he goes through the adrenaline dump of like having raised the cup. After that, now he's looking for someone to pass the Stanley Cup and there's no one around to take it. So now he's in this like, does anyone want this thing? Like he's looking around and he finally passes it off to somebody else. To me, Wish, that was the number one memory I will take away from the cup celebration.
Well, speaking of celebrations, you might be able to hear in the background, for those who are listening to the podcast, I am at the arena still, and the friends and family and players are currently having a gigantic party and celebration in the restaurant here in the arena. I think the cup might have made an appearance there.
You should have just set up shop there. You should have just been there. Hey guys, I'm live from the party.
Trust me, ink-stained wretches in the media aren't usually allowed in the room with the family that come. Two more Maurice things real quick. First of all, in his if you've not seen his post-cup press conference, find it. There was only about 7 of us in the room with him, and he went on for 20 minutes, and he was incredible. He compared NHL coaches to the animals that you see in the commercials where the Sarah McLachlan music plays, and says that he finally feels like he's been adopted as a pet by the Florida Panthers. And then the other thing he said that was incredible was apparently when he came to the practice facility for the Panthers the day of Game 7, there's this bank of televisions they have there in the locker room, and one of the televisions was on a station, and I'm guessing it could be our station, ESPN, and on the bottom of the screen in giant letters was, "If the Florida Panthers lose Game 7, is it the greatest collapse in the history of sports?" And he's staring at this thing, and he's staring at this thing, and he's getting so much anxiety looking at it. And he's thinking to himself, I'm 50-something years old. Imagine if a 20-something-year-old walks in here and sees that this is what they're playing for tonight on top of playing for the cup. And he finally got somebody who works at the arena to come over, and he's like, change this channel and never put it back on again, because of how much anxiety it was causing. So at least we know now that they were cognizant that they were facing humiliation on top of losing the cup. But Maurice was awesome. Go find that press conference if you can.
Couple of other things from the broadcast, the pictures that we saw during the celebration. The Tkachuk family was awesome.
Yeah.
So Matthew Tkachuk raises the cup. Brady's in attendance. And by the way, this was hours after he gets a new goaltender in Linus Ullmark, which was hilarious in itself because that news literally came like minutes before Game 7.
Incredible.
I can only imagine what you were thinking in that moment. Like, you're getting ready for one of the biggest games in NHL history. And oh, by the way, hey, guys, there's a massive trade that just happened.
I was thinking Gary Bettman was on the phone to Central Registry and be like, reject the trade. These guys are jerks. Like, how dare you try to break news 5 minutes before puck drop for Game 7 of the Cup final, you morons. But
that was pretty funny. But anyway, so Brady Tkachuk is in the stands, and when Matthew raises the cup, he has this just this welling sense of pride, and he's almost crying with joy. Like, you could see it in his face. He has his hands over his mouth. Keith Tkachuk, dad, is in front, like the whole family's around. And then they all go on the ice, and Brady's obviously not going to touch the Stanley Cup, but he's hugging his brother. But Keith, no problem with it, full view, raises the cup over his head. And I'm like, you know what? Like, in the whole superstition of the Stanley Cup wish, if you don't win the cup in your playing years, which Keith Tkachuk did not, but then your son wins the Stanley Cup, I guess that's the exception. I guess in that moment you can raise the cup.
Absolutely. And then we should also mention Matthew Tkachuk giving a shout out to the fans in Calgary, letting them know, I believe on Sportsnet, that he would never let the Oilers win the cup, which is just beautiful. Again, Canada's team, all that nonsense we've talked about for weeks. What a lie. Nobody in Calgary wanted to see Edmonton win anything in this series, and I'm glad Dick Tkachuk called that out.
So from your point of view,
ice, yeah, on the ice, it was beautiful. I mean, I was telling another writer this tonight that it never gets old to be able to shuffle out on the ice in your little shoes and look around at all of these people having the best moment of their lives. I mean, and they share it with their, like you said, with parents and with kids and with friends and with their teammates, and everybody's off on their own little island, just having this wonderful moment with the people that they love and that supported them, and in some cases, drove them to the rink at 6 a.m. when they were kids. Like, it is the distillation of everything that we love about this sport and about the people that play this sport, and you just get to see it firsthand, and it goes on for hours. It's incredible. Couple things that I noticed. One was Vinny Viola, the owner of the Florida Panthers. He told me he will take the cup to West Point. That was a big point of contention last year, where both Viola and Bill Foley are Army grads. The Knights win the cup. The Panthers don't. Panthers win it this time. He will be taking it to West Point. But he told me something beautiful. He said that, like, the thing that he loved the most about tonight was that it is going to be the best night of somebody's life for a young girl or boy who's a Panthers fan and watching this team, and that it means so much to him that he was able to help turn this franchise around. Again, one of the things we haven't talked about a lot, dude, this is the 30th anniversary of this team coming into the league. In that time, there's been a lot of losing. I got a story up on ESPN.com chronicling how bad this run has been. I mean, they were the laughing stock of the league. At one point, anyone with a valid driver's license in Florida could get a free ticket to the game because that's how much they were hurting for attendance. And they almost became a bigger joke if they had gotten, reverse swept. They would have been the Atlanta Falcons against the New England Patriots and an even bigger laughing stock, but they avoided it. And in the process became Stanley Cup champions. You could see the pride in Vinny Viola in having been a part of that turnaround for the franchise.
Yeah, it's really cool to see a lot of players. Just a couple more before we move on here and tie a bow. Cool to see Kyle Okposo raise the cup. He was the hey, old guy, been in the league a long time. He finally gets a cup, and you could tell listening to him talk how much it meant to him, clearly. And finally, a Stanley Cup champion, Greg Wyshynski, Roberto Luongo. What a moment where he raises the Stanley Cup. At long last, Roberto, revenge for 2011. He gets it done.
I talked to Lou for a bit on the ice after they won the cup. First of all, he was the guy who banged the drum before the game to get the fans going. I've never seen anything more violent than that man hitting the drum. And I asked him about it, and he's just like, I had a lot of aggression over the last 2 weeks that I had to work out on that drum because of them blowing the 3-0 lead. But he said it's something interesting. He said, as a player, you feel tension before a game, and then the puck drops and it releases. You're not thinking about it anymore. You're in the flow of play. As an executive, you're tense the entire time. There is no release. You're biting your fingernails. You're worried to death that something's going to go wrong. And it was just the interesting juxtaposition. But like you said, awesome to see a guy who was synonymous for failing in a game 7, be a part of a team that thrived and won, and gave a shout out to Bobrovsky. And we should probably mention Bob for a second here. He didn't deserve the Conn Smythe, but he probably was the MVP of game 7. I thought he battled. It was a little chaotic, got a little lucky sometimes, but 2 Vezina trophies and a Stanley Cup, my friend. If he wasn't going to the Hall of Fame before, he's going now.
He absolutely is going now. You are absolutely right about that. Before we go, that's it. The Stanley Cup has been awarded. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers. Couple of things left on the docket in terms of the NHL season for ESPN. The NHL awards are on Thursday, and the NHL draft is on Friday. Then after that, the drop, this will be my last episode because I will be on vacation, but Wish, there's one episode left for the season for us. What's that going to be?
Yeah, we're going to do winners and losers of the NHL offseason. We will encapsulate the awards, we'll encapsulate the draft, we'll encapsulate free agency starting on July 1st. And we will go into the summer celebrating those who did well and doing as we do on the drop, bemoaning and ridiculing those who do poorly.
Thanks to everybody for listening and watching the show throughout the entire season.
Right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. This was a great season. There was a lot to talk about. And you know what? I'll be honest, it's great when we are together in the same room. A lot of our shows were in different places, but we got it done. 2 shows a week, and that's not an easy undertaking, my friend. So if there's someone that I would like to take that journey on season after season, it is you. So I'm glad that we made it through.
You're my favorite man in the world. I cannot tell you how happy it makes me to talk hockey with you and do stupid things with you and approach the game as we approach it, and also hear how meaningful it is to people who dig what we do. It is amazing that the show has grown the way that it has this season in particular. And so we thank you for that. And I mean, it's the Cup final, baby. It's the end of the road. A lot of people checked out the drop during the Stanley Cup final for these overnight shows that we've been doing. And got to give a shout out to Justin and Kenny, our producers, for making that happen. Because it's late for everybody. Super late for you guys when I was in Edmonton, and I think it was a real fun playoff. Maybe the best postseason of all time, but potentially
Quite possible.
We didn't maybe get enough overtimes for it to be the best of all time, but without question, one of the most memorable and maybe the most important Game 7 we've ever had, with the Panthers finally winning the cup.
Indeed. Thank you all for being on that journey with us. One episode left, free agency, and then we will shut her down for the summer, and we'll see you next season here on The Drop. Congratulations, Florida Panthers, your 2024 Stanley Cup champions.
Woo!